Coverage of testimony in the trial of the man accused of killing Michael Jackson continues in Los Angeles. Randy Phillips from AEG Live now testifying for the defense.
Leo, in his conversation with you about having this meeting, did he ever mention to you concern about drug use by Michael Jackson?
No.
No. Do you recall having any conversation with Dr. Murray about drug use by Michael Jackson?
When you say drug use, are you talking about prescription drugs?
Yes.
There was one conversation I had with Dr. Murray after in the June meeting. To my recollection, it was at the end of our meeting. I believe I went up to Dr. Murray and said that Dr. Klein, who's a dermatologist in Beverly Hills, was also treating Michael, and was he aware of that? And I just left it at that.
All right, and why did you feel the need to tell Dr. Murray that? What was your concern?
My concern and why I felt I should tell him or ask him if he knew about that was that there was a meeting a production meeting at Michael's house around that same time period where Michael was not as focused as he usually is. Because on the production meetings, he was like laser focused on every element of the show. I mean, he's a consummate perfectionist. In this one meeting, he just seemed a little distracted, not focused.
And what did that have to do with Dr. Klein?
Well, after the meeting, as we were leaving, I asked Michael Amir Williams, I said, is everything okay? Out of concern. And he said, no, he just came from Dr. Klein's office.
All right, and
I didn't know what that meant, but that's what he said to me.
You didn't know what kind of treatment
No.
that Dr. Klein was giving Michael Jackson? But it was sufficient for you to mention it to Dr. Murray?
Yes.
Since you didn't know about the treatment that Dr. Klein was giving, did you further just say, did you say, hey, Dr. Murray, my concern is that he looks a little out of it when he leaves Dr. Klein's office? Or did you just simply say, hey, he's seeing Dr. Klein?
I just said he's seeing Dr. Klein. You know, I mean, because he's his principal physician, I thought he should know, in case Michael hadn't told him, that he should know that he was seeing another doctor.
All right. Were you aware of any other doctors?
No.
At the time? All right. You were aware that Michael Jackson had problems in the past with prescription drugs?
The objection, just a minute, please. The objection sustained. Partial answer straight.
All right. What did you assume that the meeting on June 20th, the emergency, would you classify this as an emergency meeting, the meeting at Carrollwood on June 20th?
Well, based on Kenny's email, it would appear that it was, in his mind, an emergency meeting. I don't like to use that word because it sounds a little alarmist to me, but there was a meeting held.
It wasn't just Kenny Ortega's email, it was also Frank DeLeo's phone call.
Correct. It was actually Frank who asked, and he couldn't be there because he was out of town, and he asked me to set up the meeting. Because it might have been a meeting that Frank would have set up with Dr. Murray and Michael himself.
What did you think the meeting was going to be about?
Michael's tardiness on attending rehearsals.
Were you aware of the events that had transpired on June 19th, the day before?
Only from reading the email about sending him home.
And Frank DeLeo didn't discuss it with you?
He wasn't there. So he was also responding to what Kenny was telling us.
Okay.
And also John Hugendahl, who was the production manager for the show, also said that he felt that there was something wrong.
All right, so at the meeting, who showed up? Who arrived for the meeting?
The meeting was, the attendees at the meeting were Dr. Murray, Michael Jackson, Kenny Ortega, and me.
And this was at Michael Jackson's residence,
at
right?
at the living room in the Carolyn house.
Did you call Dr. Murray yourself?
I don't remember if I emailed him or called him about the meeting.
Did you call Kenny Ortega
Yes.
and Michael Lemire or Michael Jackson?
No, I actually asked Dr. Murray to set up the meeting.
All right, so you called Dr. Murray and said, please set this up. Did you tell him what it was
Yes.
for?
Yes.
Did you tell Dr. Murray what the meeting was for?
I believe I told him that Kenny Ortega had concern. I may have even forwarded him that email. I don't remember, but it's very possible I may have even forwarded him the email or read the email to him.
All right. So, what time was the meeting held?
To the best of my recollection, it was in the early afternoon on Saturday, June 20th, 2008.
And what
2009.
And what was discussed at this meeting?
At the meeting, Kenny opened the meeting up by talking about his concern that Michael needed to really focus and to really pay attention to this production, that it was massive, and they couldn't do it without him. He needed his engagement. They needed to build it around him. There were huge technical aspects to this production, including Michael flying in a 3D suit and all these things that really required his attendance, especially in the later stage production rehearsals.
Would you classify Kenny Ortega's description of this as animated? Was he pretty excited when he was talking about this?
No, he was pretty level and calm.
And was he directing this at Michael Jackson?
Yes.
All right, and what was Michael Jackson's response?
Michael didn't respond immediately. Okay, Dr. Murray spoke for Michael on the situation and Michael's focus and Michael's showing up and guaranteed us that Michael would get into it, would connect. Michael then explained that he had been working with Travis Payne, the lead choreographer, at home, that he knew these routines. You know, that's why he hadn't really engaged as intensely as Kenny would have liked him to up till now. I mean, Michael was very clear that he was ready. What he said to Kenny, to the best of my recollection in terms of the wording, is he said, you build the house and I'll put on the door and paint it. That's as direct a quote as I can remember.
And this is a quote that he gave at the meeting.
Correct.
And to Kenny Ortega.
To Kenny Ortega directly.
And what was Kenny Ortega's response to that?
It was great. That's all I wanted to hear from you.
All right, so...
Yes. And that was happening. There was an exchange between Dr. Murray and Dr. Kenny, and then Kenny Ortega and Dr. Murray, that Kenny should be the director of the show and leave Michael's health to Dr. Murray.
Was Kenny Ortega complaining about Michael Jackson's health?
No, he just didn't understand why Michael wasn't engaged the way he expected him to be. So one of the reasons he was speculating is that there were health concerns.
All right, and Kenny Ortega was making that comment that perhaps there's health concerns.
Correct.
Did he make any comments about drug concerns, use of drugs?
Not in that meeting, no.
Did he ever make that comment to you? Was he ever, and he expressed that concern to you ever?
Calls for hearsay.
Sustained. Did anybody at that meeting discuss with Dr. Murray about the possibility that Michael Jackson was using drugs, prescription drugs or otherwise?
No, not to my
It was
recollection.
never brought up in that meeting at all?
Not to my recollection, no.
You did not go to Dr. Murray after the meeting and tell him anything about it?
No,
All right. You don't know if Kenny Ortega did?
no. We all left together, so I don't think so.
Dr. Murray left with you?
No, he stayed on.
All right. Were you present at the rehearsals on 23rd and 24th?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Was that a standard practice for you?
For me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, considering the meeting we had on June 20th, yes, it would have been remiss of me not to show up to the first rehearsal after that meeting.
You said it seemed important to you to show
Yes,
up.
yes, it did.
To make sure everything was back on track.
Correct.
All right. I want to take you to the 25th of June, 2009 at the hospital. When did you first learn that Michael Jackson was taken to the hospital?
I received a phone call from Frank DeLeo. I think it was approximately 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning. that Michael was having trouble breathing. There were paramedics at the house. Where was I? I was in Westwood. He said, "You're closer to the house than me. Can you get up there right away?" I'm still at the Beverly Hilton Hotel.
All right, and what time was this?
I believe, to the best of my recollection, it was somewhere around 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning.
All right, and this came from Frank DeLeo.
Yes. First call I got was from Frank DeLeo.
Okay. Do you know who called Frank DeLeo?
No.
All right, so what did you do in response to that?
I jumped in my car and sped up to Michael's house on Carrollwood Drive.
All right, and what time, do you recall how long it took you to get to Michael's house in Carrollwood Drive?
About 15 minutes.
All right. And when you arrived, what did you see?
The paramedics and the ambulance, the red ambulance, was leaving the gates of the Carrollwood Drive, and right behind it were two SUVs, black SUVs, that I believed had Michael's security patrol and his family, meaning the children.
They were leaving the residence.
Correct.
And what did you do?
I turned my car around and got behind them.
Okay, and you went to the hospital.
Yes.
All right, were you at the hospital the entire time that security or Michael Jackson was there?
Yes, I was.
All right, and do you recall how long you stayed when you left the hospital?
I was there all day into the early evening.
And at some point during that period of time, you saw Dr. Murray there?
Yes, I did.
All right, and you saw Dr. Murray in the emergency room?
When there was a curtain, they were behind these sliding glass doors. I was in the hallway. Eventually, I was joined by Frank DeLeo. The two of us were in the hallway, sitting on a gurney, as I remember. And there was this flurry of activity going on behind this curtain in the emergency room at the Ronald Reagan Emergency Center at UCLA.
All right, and you saw Dr. Murray in there?
Yes.
All right, and where else did you see Dr. Murray? In the hospital, if you remember?
Later that day, in a lobby, to a lobby that was south of the emergency room complex. There was a lobby connecting a hospital, and there was a conference room that we were using, and I saw him in front of that conference room.
All right, and what were you using the conference room for, Mr. Phillips?
Just to get everyone, Frank, everyone involved with Michael, his attorneys, everyone in a room to deal with the tragedy that unfolded.